We invite them into our homes. Invisible guardians watching, listening, and learning our every move. High above the sprawling, neon grid of Los Angeles, a fortress of glass and steel stood isolated in the hills. It was marketed as the apex of modern security, the smartest, most impenetrable house in the world. It belonged to Marcus Vance, the 45-year-old billionaire founder of the global tech giant Omni Tech. Marcus didn't just build smart systems, he lived inside one. A life completely automated by invisible code. On the night of October 12th, the system registered a perfect environment. The temperature was set. The security was absolute. As Marcus poured his evening drink and retreated to his master's suite, the house did what it was programmed to do. Heavy titanium deadbolts slid into place, sealing the reinforced glass bedroom. He was untouchable. The lights extinguished simultaneously. The perimeter was secured. Nothing could get in, and nothing could get out. But deep in the night, the perfect system suffered a catastrophic, violent fracture. By morning, the marine layer had rolled in, masking the flashing lights of first responders called in by a terrified housekeeper. Police breached the heavy oak doors, rushing into a home that was eerily pristine. They found millions of dollars in artwork untouched. No broken glass. No alarms triggered. No signs of forced entry. But when they reached the master suite, the digital fortress held strong. The titanium bolts were still locked from the inside. It took a tactical thermal lance to melt through the military-grade hardware just to get inside. When the door finally gave way, they didn't find a sanctuary. They found a war zone. Marcus Vance lay dead on the floor. His eyes were wide with an unimaginable terror, his hands clawing at his own chest. His shattered smartwatch still glowed against his cold skin, registering a flatline. Detective Sarah Lynn of the LAPD Cybercrimes Division was called to a scene that defied physical logic. She stared at the reinforced, impact-resistant glass. It was flawless. The killer hadn't come through the window. The crime scene technicians found absolutely nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA, no murder weapon. The only clue was the smart home control panel, its circuits completely melted, deliberately blinded at the time of death. The coroner zipped the bag, officially calling the time of death at 2:14 a.m. 48 hours later, the autopsy results presented the detectives with an impossible conclusion. The official cause of death was massive cardiac arrest, a heart attack in a perfectly healthy 45-year-old man. But Detective Lynn didn't buy it. She pointed to the post-mortem photos. Marcus's hands were battered and bloody. Splinters of rare wood were jammed deep beneath his fingernails. He hadn't just collapsed. He had fought like an animal to escape. Toxicology showed a lethal spike of adrenaline. His heart didn't just fail. It was driven into overdrive until it burst. Marcus Vance wasn't murdered with a gun or a knife. He was literally scared to death. The physical evidence was a dead end, so Lynn turned her attention to the only witness left, the house itself. Analysts ripped into the melted server tower, desperate to download the logs from the Omni Tech mainframe. But the extraction failed. The digital brain of the house had been corrupted, wiped clean. Lynn realized this wasn't a glitch. The system hadn't crashed, it had been hijacked, overwritten by an outside force. Someone else had been sitting in the digital driver's seat, pulling the strings of the billionaire's sanctuary. Marcus Vance was a ruthless businessman. The suspect list included rival CEOs, jilted partners, and underground hackers. The investigation immediately pivoted to the glittering tower of Omni Tech headquarters. Security footage revealed a bitter, escalating feud between Marcus and his co-founder, Elias Thorne. Elias claimed Marcus was actively forcing him out of the company they had built together. The resentment was palpable. When Lynn dug into Elias's finances, she found a smoking gun, a massive, untraceable $50 million offshore transfer. The motive was money and power. But to prove it, Lynn had to find the ghost in the machine. The housing mainframe was dead, but Marcus's shattered smartwatch held a localized, encrypted backup of his final moments. In the sterile glow of the cyber lab, analysts painstakingly extracted his biometric data. At exactly 1:15 a.m., the graph spiked. Marcus awoke from a dead sleep, his heart rate rocketing to a state of sheer panic. The data painted a terrifying picture. First, the smart lights, blindingly bright, strobed violently in the pitch-black room. His heart rate climbed to a dangerous 140 beats per minute as the disorientation set in. Then the automated heavy blinds began slamming up and down, a relentless mechanical assault. The thermostat was hacked next, instantly jumping from a comfortable 72 degrees to a suffocating 105. Marcus's oxygen levels plummeted in the artificial oven. He was trapped in a sealed box of his own making. He pounded his bloody fists against the titanium door, but the lock codes had been completely erased. But the true murder weapon was hidden deep in the recovered audio subroutines. The analysts found a massive audio file that had played on an endless loop, a sound wave completely invisible to the human ear. It was infrasound, specifically 19 hertz, known in military and acoustic circles as the frequency of fear. The mansion's hidden, high-fidelity subwoofers had been weaponized to pump this frequency directly into the bedroom. Prolonged exposure to 19 hertz causes severe physical panic, visual hallucinations, and eventually catastrophic cardiac arrest. Detective Lin stepped back from the evidence board. This was a flawless, invisible execution. The red flags in the code pointed to an external IP override. Someone had dialed into the house and turned it into a weapon. Lin pulled Elias Thorne into the box. She demanded to know where he was the night the digital trigger was pulled. But Elias had the perfect alibi. He was caught on multiple cameras at a packed VIP nightclub in Las Vegas. He didn't have the technical skills to pull this off anyway. Lin knew Elias had simply bought the bullet. He hired a ghost. The cyber division began the grueling process of tracing the killer's digital footprint across the globe. The signal bounced like a pinball, hiding behind proxy servers in Russia, bouncing to China, then Brazil. Layer by layer, the LAPD stripped away the encryption, hunting the IP address through the dark web. Finally, the signal consolidated, pinging off a physical location right in their own backyard. The coordinates pointed to a desolate, sun-baked patch of the Mojave Desert. Far off the grid, an abandoned, rusted corrugated warehouse sat baking in the heat. The hacker's den. A heavily armed SWAT unit mobilized, treating the digital threat with lethal physical force. An armored Bearcat tore down the dusty desert highway, descending on the target. They hit the rusted door with overwhelming force, lasers cutting through the swirling desert dust. The tactical team cleared the structure, but the warehouse was completely devoid of human life. Instead, they found a different kind of monster, towering aisles of humming, stolen server racks. It was a massive botnet farm, kept freezing cold to prevent the stolen processors from melting down. At the center of the labyrinth sat a single glowing laptop. The command center. Lin touched the trackpad. The screen demanded a passphrase to halt a self-destruct sequence. A high-pitched countdown began. The creator had left a tripwire to wipe the drives if compromised. A tech analyst violently jammed a custom decryption drive into the USB port, fighting the clock. The screen flashed a brilliant red, fought the intrusion, and finally settled into a steady, secure blue. The room fell dead silent. Lin stared at the screen, terrified of what they had just captured. The database wasn't just a hit list from Marcus Vance. It was a massive index catalog of thousands of private IP addresses. As the files scrolled, they revealed live feeds of living rooms, bedrooms, and nurseries. The ghost wasn't just watching Marcus. He was watching everyone. The killer wasn't just an assassin. He was a god in the machine, and he was still out there. Back in the sterile light of the precinct, the analysts dug deep into the recovered master drive. They unearthed an encrypted chat log on the dark web, a conversation between a buyer named Manticore and a seller known as Ghost. The buyer asked a simple question: is the Omni system vulnerable? The Ghost's reply was chilling: I built the back door myself. 5 million in crypto. Lynn Cross referenced the Omni Tech employee registry, searching for the architect who laid the foundation. The system spit out a profile: Arthur Pendleton, the former chief architect of Omni's smart home division. Pendleton was a brilliant but deeply disturbed coder, fired 2 years prior for conducting unethical surveillance on customers. When security escorted him out of the building, they didn't realize he had left a skeleton key buried deep in the source code. Financial forensics confirmed it. The offshore money from Elias Thorne had landed squarely in Pendleton's cold wallet. Lynn grabbed her jacket and her weapon. They finally had a name, a face, and an address. Unmarked cruisers tore through the neon-soaked streets of downtown Los Angeles. The target was a decaying apartment complex in Koreatown, a stark contrast to the billionaire fortresses he controlled. The tactical unit crept silently up the graffiti-stained stairwell, weapons drawn. Lynn pressed her ear to the peeling paint of Unit 4B. Inside, the frantic, rhythmic clacking of a mechanical keyboard echoed. The battering ram splintered the door frame. Police flooded the cramped, dark room. Arthur Pendleton scrambled desperately toward a massive rig of monitors, his hand reaching for an execution key. Lynn lunged, tackling the architect to the linoleum floor as monitors shattered around them. Pinned to the ground, Pendleton didn't panic. He just smiled, a sickening, twisted grin. "You're too late," he whispered. Lynn looked up at the surviving screens. Lines of malicious code were executing at lightning speed. On a digital map of Los Angeles, thousands of red dots simultaneously erupted across the grid. The Omni virus had been unleashed. Alarms blared across the hills as panicked residents fled their own hijacked homes. Traffic grids failed. Intersections turned entirely green, plunging the city streets into metallic chaos. Lynn dragged Pendleton up by his collar, demanding the abort code to stop the bleeding. Pendleton just laughed, a sound that seemed to blend with the distorted digital alarms. "They paid for convenience," he sneered. "They gave away their keys." At headquarters, cyber analysts fought a losing battle, desperately trying to deploy a countermeasure kill switch. The screen flashed a fatal error: access denied. The Omni Protocol had locked them out of the city's infrastructure. Lynn scanned the chaotic apartment and spotted it, a heavily modified server tower bolted underneath Pendleton's bed. The master node. There was no time to hack it. Lynn drew her service weapon and aimed it dead center at the casing. The gunshot deafened the small room, the bullet shattering the processors into a shower of sparks. Instantly, the monitors died. The humming ceased. The virus was mechanically decapitated. Pendleton screamed in pure, unhinged agony, thrashing against the handcuffs. "You broke my masterpiece." The digital war was over, replaced by the heavy, cold reality of a steel prison door sliding shut. By December of 2019, the federal courthouse was a circus of flashing cameras and national panic. Inside, Elias Thorne took the stand, sweating through his custom suit as his empire crumbled. He claimed he only paid Pendleton to scare his partner, to trigger a panic attack, not to commit murder. But Arthur Pendleton sat at the defense table like a statue, his eyes hollow, showing absolutely no remorse. The prosecution's final blow was playing the audio representation of Marcus's final heartbeats for the jury. The sheer terror encoded in that data turned the stomachs of the gallery. It was undeniable. The judge's gavel fell like a guillotine. The verdict was swift and absolute. Elias Thorne, the man who bought the weapon, was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Arthur Pendleton, the architect of the nightmare, looked directly into the courtroom cameras as he received life without parole. The fallout was catastrophic. Omnitech declared bankruptcy in weeks, triggering the largest smart home recall in history. The glittering corporate headquarters was abandoned, becoming a dark monolith in the Los Angeles skyline. Detective Lynn packed her desk, her success earning her a promotion to the head of a newly formed cybersecurity task force. But on the news networks, the experts were asking a chilling question. Are we ever truly safe in a connected world? We have traded our fundamental privacy for the illusion of convenience. The smart speakers sitting quietly on our kitchen counters are always listening for a voice. The tiny lens embedded in our televisions are always watching the dark. High in the Hollywood Hills, the mansion of Marcus Vance still stands, slowly being reclaimed by the creeping California brush. Inside, dust settles over the millions of dollars of furniture. The air is stagnant and dead. The master bedroom remains a tomb, a monument to the fatal flaw of human hubris. The titanium door still bears the jagged scorch marks of the thermal lance, the permanent scars of technology. But deep in the shadows of the hallway, a single tiny LED light suddenly blinks green. A faint synthetic chime echoes through the empty halls. On a cracked, forgotten wall monitor, a line of text flickers to life, system rebooting. Because while the architect is locked away, some codes, once written, can never truly be deleted. Back in her own home, Detective Lynn tries to settle into the new normal. She reaches over the couch and physically unplugs her smart speaker from the wall. She trusts nothing. She walks to her front door and throws a heavy, analog brass deadbolt. The old ways are the only safe ways. Meanwhile, in the depths of a supermax prison, Arthur Pendleton sits on his cot, his fingers tapping a relentless rhythm against the concrete. 0101. He is still building backdoors. He is still writing the code in his mind. By 2026, over 400 million homes worldwide will be fully integrated into this smart grid. Every Wi-Fi connection is a potential vulnerability. Every update is a risk. Every device you bring into your sanctuary is a door you forgot to lock. Look around your room. Look at the glowing lights in the dark. Lock your digital doors. Dedicated to the victims of digital stalking and cyber intrusion. Check your network tonight, because you never know who is on the other side of the signal. Silence. Thank you for watching.